Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you join us today at Nkola Mohadum Wisdom University. My name is Dr. Obioramba Iboweze, reaching you from Nkola Mohadum. Please join us today. Today's date is Market Day in the Igbo lunar calendar, and 10/7/25 in the Roman Catholic calendar. Also, remember that at Nkola Mahadum, we always advise you to use your naturally given common sense, which we call Akonuche in Igbo language. Also, we are set up to decolonize your mind, provide you the correct information than the misinformation, miseducation, and misdirection from our colonial masters and their institutions in our land. And also remember that our interest is to protect the Igbos, the Biafrans, and Africans. That's why we are set up. That's why we package and present. Anything we are presenting to you is for you to be seeing things from that angle. As an Igbo man, how does world affair affect you? What does anything that is happening affecting our race as Igbos? And today we have a special guest in our lecture today. In fact, we are welcoming Mr. Keny Inugo. Keny Inugo is a public analyst who specializes in media, psychology, and public policy. And we are here to discuss the United Nations. We are here to discuss the United Nations. You know that we've been hearing about United Nations. Recently, they finished their General Assembly from September 23rd to September 29. I want to know whether this United Nations General Assembly is actually helping us or not. And with this introduction, I will bring in Mr. Keny Inugo, who is a public analyst specializing in media, psychology, and public safety. Keny, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I feel welcome already. I thank you for what you're doing, what is very, very, very impactful at this time for human race in general and the people of Igbo segment of human race because of their special position in world affairs today.
And so, Mr. Keny, how was the United Nations formed?
Well, people always seek or say they seek for peace, and in so doing, they garner all kinds of resources, good, bad, and in between. The United Nations, for history's sake, was formed in the mid-40s, for 1945 to be precise. But there were some politics that went along it before it. The Second World War just ended, and the power tussle between the East and the West and the North and South was actually taking place, and the remnant of scramble for Africa, had not dawned on many of the so-called powers. So when the United Nations was formed, it was to douse some of those acrimonies, some of those fights. And remember, they are fighting for Africa, scrambling for Africa, how to divide a continent of people. And those people are not even on the table. So that is the background. I mean, this is a very elementary way of explaining the origin of United Nations. But we don't have enough time because United Nations alone is more than a semester course in a university program.
That's correct. Who are the original founders of the United Nations, and what was their intention?
Well, you know that they always say the East and the West. And when you say the East, you mean in those days, not today, Soviet Union. Then in the West, you pretty much mean United States. And when that war ended, there were so many other things that were, interest of two major powers. They were the two major powers. Of course, there was France, there was United Kingdom, and of course, Germany had been just dismantled, so they were not part of the of course, Japan, the same thing. So you're talking about basically Russia or Soviet Union and the United States, East and West. To balance the equation, they were able to come up with ways to be admitted into the United Nations, which really, again, because the main topic we have today is the United Nations and Africa. And
That's
every
correct.
time Africa is seen as a property of the East and the West. I don't care how anybody wants to look at it. Both the West and the East were partakers of this dinner of Africa, to dissect Africa and eat or consume or whatever you want to look at it. Today we know what it is. So, in summary, the East and the West are fighting for Africa, position in the world, because people like the United States ended up in places like Philippines, Southeast Asia. Soviet Union wanted to replace in Cuba, that brought about this Cuban crisis in the early 60s during the time of Kennedy, the President Kennedy of the United States, and so on. There were so many issues, but like I said, we just take it bit by bit, and the best we can get, because it's a bigger issue. It's a 1 year, it's a program. United Nations is an entire program for you to study and understand their origin, their continued presence, and even as where they are today, whether they mean anything or anybody can get up and say anything and get away with it.
Okay, is it okay for the founders, for those that founded the United Nations, to have 5 permanent members, as 5 countries as being permanent and with veto power? Why a continent like Africa with 1 point something billion people don't have permanent membership and veto power, and country like India don't have, that has 1.4 billion people, don't have permanent membership or and veto power? Is it fair to Africans?
Well, you're getting into international geopolitics, which, of course, is what United Nations and our topic is all about. People that are affected will obviously say it's not fair. But those people who perpetrate it will say it's the best way to secure world peace. I don't know whether that leaves the world in peace or in pieces and tatters.
Okay. So now, in 1945, like you said, that when the date that United Nations was formed, no African country was independent then. African countries weren't independent, and they are not even on the table. So will African countries now trust that formation, that body, as they are not present when it was formed?
Well, your question is very apt, but the answer is very simple. I don't believe that the United States the United Nations organization, UNO, was designed for the interest of Africa per se, because Africa was the food on the table.
That's correct.
Uh-huh. That's why they had no position. They were not considered. I don't even know if they were considered to be human beings worthy of a position in the United Nations Assembly. But be it as it may, um, African nations at this time now, if we talk about this time, deserve a prominent, or not but prominent positions. And yeah, we know we have United Nations organizations like World Health Organization, World Trade Organizations, where we have Ebu sister, Professor Iwala, Okonji Iweala, heading, and there are many other organizations. But just look at the way the United States AIDS and international development was just dismissed overnight by a president of the United States, because that's the system that the America operates. The president that comes up can develop his own policies. And these things affect nations. Most of what you say USAID was doing in the countries are now left open, but they were supported or part go in alliance with the United Nations. But right now, some of the services being provided by those organizations are gone. However, one is not going to cry over spilled milk, besides the fact that I don't know how much those organizations actually helped African nations per se. But one will look back at the origin, the intent, and then say, okay, well, they're actually doing what they want to do because they want to be in total the Western world, or rather the ruling world. Don't just call it the Western world, because I'm quite believing that even the Eastern world are in cahoot with some of the things happening in Africa. Some of them, some people will look at the Eastern world, China, Russia, and all that as saving grace. They are not, but maybe they are the lesser of the two evils, as they say sometimes. However, what's important right now is for Africa to remember that the days that, like you rightly said, they were crying for independence is gone. You've gotten it, but are you really independent? Do you make a decision without seeking for the masters, the colonial masters, or erstwhile colonial masters, who are still colonial masters, if you look at it? That is why the young man came up from Burkina Faso and said, no, I don't read your scripts. I write my own scripts, like it or not. Well, if I'm going, I hope I'm not going too far ahead of you, but it's a point to be reckoned with.
Very good. So, what do you expect African leaders to be doing now? Now we are in the 21st century, and they just celebrated 80th year of the UN without an African country offered a permanent membership of the UN or veto power. Should African countries continue to trust the UN? What are they going to be doing now to show the UN that they're not happy, that they're not part of what is part of the decision making of the UN? And the UN, the way they set it up, with the veto power, if the 4 permanent members with veto power, if the 4 permanent members with veto power say yes to something, and one say no, the whole world will follow that one. That one country that says no, it will void everything. How will Africa respond to that? This setup that is badly affecting them from participating in this world body?
Well, your question is very, very proper, but the answer is not that easy, because it's how should African nations react? Actually, the issue should be how should they initiate programs and support those programs, and who are those people to support those programs? Because most of those programs will be to continue to dislodge the colonial mentality, the colonial activity, and all those things that hold them down. Call them politically independent, but economically even more subjected. Subjected to foreign powers. So when you take countries that within the country themselves, there's no democracy, you bring the issue of maybe Nigeria, maybe Kenya, maybe Egypt. I don't see a nation in the entire Africa that has the democratic wherewithal to bring the right thinking leadership that will move to United Nations and ask for what is best for the populace. Because as it was, as we have seen, they go there for showboating, show off how many people went with them. Some of them are looking at ESTA codes and the opportunity to travel out of the nation. Some of them don't even know how many states they have in their country. And some of them don't have enough history of their country. So looking at the international geopolitics of the whole situation right now, how many people will understand the impact of United States going to Iran to bomb Iran and this pretty much destroy their military power? Some people will argue on the one side, yes, it is good because they were terrorists. Some people will say, no, it's not good. It's a sovereign nation. They have the right to maintain and so on. And other issues. Bring Gaza. People are saying, how could United Nations be silent at the issue of United States taking over Gaza, managing it? And some other people will say, why not? Because Gaza has been the den of terrorists, as has been said. But so you have to look at all these things on both sides, and then you wonder. When people go to the Suez Canal, that's an international passage, and keep bombing that place and making it unusable, what do you say? Then when the world is watching United States take a position and take action to stop the origin, or what they consider to be the origin of the forces that obstruct a free passage of goods and people in the international highways, seaways, it's very difficult to say is this way or that way. United Nations should have been. This is the type of things United States. But remember that the United Nations has no army of their own, really. When anything happens, they have no military of their own, not air force, not navy, not land troops. It's always nations that supply. Now, how can you act independently, assuming the United Nations take a decision, like you just said? One country will just oppose it, and when he opposes it, that's the end of it. And how can the United States, United Nations, wield power? Because you need power to enforce any policy. So when they make a policy and say no nation will go and attack another nation for whatever, if they do attack, what do you do? The United Nations cannot do much, but maybe condemn the act and then move on to the next thing. So if you bring it to Africa, why is it that the situation in South Africa took forever? Just yesterday, I remember when we were protesting for the good of South Africa, for the independence for the end of apartheid. I was a student at the University of Houston at the time. We participated. And thank God it came down to what it is today. Still could go further. But anyway, we have people who will rather push it back. And they are doing things to see that that freedom for South Africa does not quite hold. Just like every other nation. Look at West Africa. Look at the countries like Senegal, countries like Mali, countries like Nigeria that became independent more than how many years ago? They still have to go back to the colonial masters in order to make a policy to hold, because otherwise there will be a coup. They will change the head of government, or there will be all kinds of problems in the country, and the kangaroo election will be held, and their own man will be put in place.
So what you are implying is that the United Nations is not actually helping Africa, because if they, as the body, try overseeing what is going on in the world, will be there, and African governments are overthrown, they're not even allowed to make their own decision. Some of them are not even allowed to produce certain things. They say you cannot even convert your raw material into finished products, which means United Nations is ineffective in Africa, and Africans should not be celebrating this 80th anniversary because the United Nations have not been helpful to them.
Well, you got it right. Um, those who tagged the United Nations a toothless bulldog are not kidding, because it's like whoa, 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 and he wouldn't do anything. But we also have to look back at what do we do? How do you adjust the position where, like right now, what is happening? Maybe nature is allowing it to happen. China is coming up. I remember when we were younger, when they would say, the red is coming, the red is coming. The red is not coming, the red is here. China is not coming. China is here.
Okay.
And you can see whenever anything concerns like China, other nations, especially the United States, make a quick midnight visit with the Chinese authorities, and they discuss it at that level. But if anything is happening in, let me say, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, and all that, they sleep and they relax. They know nothing is going to happen unless they endorse it. You see, for example, the election that all saw and declared in Nigeria, that the current president wasn't the winner. But what happened? He's in power. He's finishing his first term, and actually the second term is almost guaranteed. If the United Nations was not a toothless bulldog, he could step up in fairness and set up an effective election or elections in different, and see that the result of these elections are actually implemented. Well, we know how it has been happening in Africa. People like PLO Lumumba has been crying himself hoarse, talking about these issues. Then we go back and say, why do the people? Because in somewhere I read that the people deserve whoever they elected. Hello? So if that is the case, does it mean that Nigeria deserves the present government? Does it mean that Burkina Faso deserve the current gentleman Traore? Or does it mean that the United States deserve their current president or not? And so on and so forth. It's not for me to say, but it's a question to be asked. I do believe that if through democracy, freedom of election, all those rules and laws and regulations regarding public administration, people's welfare is considered and implemented, we'll have a better world. But that's in my imagination and your imagination. So we just pray God to see that in policy making, if people decide, how do they put it? Like I said before, they say people deserve the officers they elect or their public um, officers, public, what do they call it now? Okay, so that those who are against the policy or um, the result, yes, the outcome of election, which is erroneous, they should not accept the installation of the defective uh, candidate, or rather the failed candidate who happens to be in cahoot with the colonial masters, maybe to the east or maybe to the west.
But you know that this foreign imported Western democracy that we are practicing in Africa is just for them to impose their puppets, somebody that will be doing their bidding. They're not actually putting somebody that will do what the masses want, what Africans wanted, but who will do their bidding. Just like in the case of the current Nigerian president, they just put him there because he's doing their bidding.
Well, it's not only in Nigeria, it's almost in every country in Africa. That's why the emergence of the current leader in Burkina Faso is very open, very eye-opening. Is it possible? Can it happen? Can it be sustained? Will it lead to the nirvana, to the promised land we are hoping for freedom? People are actually a little bit jittery about the emergence of this young man. While some other people are up, in arms saying that's the way to go. But how many African nations do they have men who actually step up, although he came up by coup? And there's really no better way to do it, because when you go for election, the colonial masters will manipulate it and put their own person in power. We are still talking about the case of Nigeria. People are
That's
talking
right.
about the case of Kenya, and so on and
That's
so
right.
forth. But when you have people like the president of Rwanda, you have people like this Burkina Faso president, and the other three Sahel conference, or whatever they call themselves, who have decided. Can you imagine when they made a decision that they want to take back their economy all by themselves and begin to implement policies that help the people, and the result oriented, and the results are evident, better than what they had before? You can understand that the United Nations should do nothing but support this type of movement that the people evidently benefit from. The policies, the economic policies that have been put in place in Mali, I mean, and not just Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, has been mind-boggling, to say the least. Because one is like, do we really have this type of economy in Africa, in these nations? I mean, the potential for growth to supply. Look at what this. We're not talking about the gold mines and the big stuff. We're talking about striking an economic deal with China, or not China, but I think it's Thailand or Cambodia, so that they can do textile that employ millions of people, and give people hope for life. I'm not talking about building nuclear arsenals and what have you, like the case of Iran and maybe North Korea and so on. So the United Nations has failed not particularly because nobody's United Nations, everybody's United Nations. Some people are not there, maybe a few countries, but the generality of the people who are there are as well toothless bulldogs. And when it comes to their own nation, I remember before, in the 60s or 70s, you had the Azikiwes of Nigeria, the Kenyattas of Kenya, the Lumumba, and the rest of them. They are either moved aside by either coup or elections that are not germane. Then, by the time they found out, by the time United Nations found out, or if I may say, stepped to the plate, it was impossible because they had no way to enforce the agreements that were made over time. I've looked at all the uh, agreements that were made, all the policies that were put in place to bring about peace, because we're talking mainly about peace. And none has been put to right. The highest thing they do is to um, kick against it, write long uh, uh, objections to a policy of, the so-called world powers against small powers. Uh, so when people like Traore came to office, Traore is no different from Lumumba. But Lumumba was removed. But that was then. This is now.
So will you not say that the failure of the United Nations up till now was the same failure that affected the loss of the Nigerian Biafran War. During the Nigerian Biafran War, genocidal war, that the United Nations failed to come and support the independence of Biafra. Because if they had supported that war, the independence of Biafra that time, an Igbo man will also be part of the people speaking at the United Nations, representing the Igbo race. So the United Nations also failed the Igbo race by not supporting the emancipation of the Biafran people during that war of independence.
Well, you just set up a time bomb. Let's see how we can navigate around that. In the eyes of the Easterners of Nigeria in 1966, what happened in northern Nigeria was nothing less than genocide. But that's in the eyes of those, they say, who feels it knows it. That's what I tell some people who are Easterners of Nigeria then, but they are not Igbos. When they talk about this Igbo coup or whatever, they really mean Easterners because, like you rightly said, the United Nations did not quite step up the plate at the time. And even when they made decisions, the colonial masters, because of their interests, for example, United Kingdom, had a different position and really didn't care. So it would have been nice if the United Nations stepped in 1966, not even 67, when the war has come.
Mm-hmm.
And then even after the war had come,
Mm-hmm.
the supply of weapons to the one side of the conflict was the worst thing that ever happened if they were looking for peace. What they did was to set up a system that brought Nigeria to pieces, because up to today, Nigeria has not recovered and may never recover because they are not looking at the issue realistically, truthfully, and practicably. Some people are, in fact, I just said that a major a prominent journalist in Nigeria just said that the war never ended. Wait a minute. Did he fight the war himself? Does he even really know what war is all about? I fought the war. I was in the war. And I can tell you better than he can tell you. He only read it. He only read it, but I felt it. I experienced it. No matter how little I was then, that's another story. Because I get very, very emotional when these issues of Biafra comes up. So I don't even today, I'm not so crazy about the Biafra thing. Why? Because it makes no sense. It makes some people angry, people like me, because just, I don't know who to blame now. And then even inside the Biafra himself, you see some people who are saying, oh, I'm not Igbo. Biafra is for the Igbos. If they had won, all of us would have been Igbos, whether we like it or not.
That's
But
correct.
because it was lost on the side of, now it's only the Igbo problem, leave it alone. Now, we have today the issue of a young man, Mazin Nnamdi Kanu. Whatever happened, his position has been declared a kidnap in another country of a man from another nation, not another citizenship, but happened to be born in Nigeria, a victim of circumstances of Biafra. And his parents took him to London. Now, you have legal issues that you're playing with regarding his life and his stay, and you keep him there. Look at the last ruling that was made, you know. So a Kenyan judge had ruled on this issue. A Nigerian judge turns around, and now here again comes the United Nations. Here again comes the ICJ, International Court of Justice. And this case has been there. And what have they ruled, or are they going to rule? on this matter to free this man. And many people have stepped up. We are going to take care of him. We're going to do this, that, everything that is required to keep him out of trouble. And then the people of Biafra, then there's nothing like Biafra now. Let us just, for the sake of this discussion, say there's no geographical location called Biafra. But Igbo has a place. The last time, one of the last books he wrote, Chinua Achebe said, there was a country. There was a country. And I wrote an article which is developing into a book, that there is a people. And it has nothing to do with country or no country. People can be of this country today, another country too, but they remain what they are. The Jews have been Jews. They've been moved around here and there and there and there and beaten here, but they are still Jews. And every other people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In order to bring this interactive section to an end, because this is the first time we're having it with you, I have my last question to you. That last question is, what will be your advice to Ndi Igbo and Africans as the way they relate to the UN? How will Ndi Igbo and African be relating to the UN in view of the fact that the UN is a failure to us? This will be my last question to you, and then we're going to come bringing the product and.
Well, just like I said earlier, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having this, no matter how small. The Igbos should focus on being Igbo. They are fighting a battle for people who don't recognize them. The Igbo man is fighting for the Ogoni man. The Ogoni man is fighting the Igbo man. The Igbo man is even fighting for the Hausa man, because he's fighting that a good government, even if even if it's not Biafra, even if it's in Nigeria, we're going to be, let's be with under a government that cares for everybody, which is very difficult because of the prejudice, at least, if not racism and all those bigotry, and I don't want to go into all that. So that if those who are saying the Igbo man cannot be president in Nigeria, they'll eat crow, and Nigeria will be a better place to live. Having said that, if you have the right government in Nigeria, maybe Nigeria will take its rightful place in Africa, because you don't answer the giant of Africa for nothing. What is happening with Traore today is probably what people like Zogu them and his group, because they say Zogu is an Igbo man. Yes, by nature, but he was a Kaduna boy with his friends at Demolago and so on, who put together a plan to change government. I don't think they plan to kill anybody. They want to change a corrupt government so that the people will move forward. It happened the way it happened, all kinds of mix up here and there and there. And that was because there was a problem in the West. They were solving the problem of the West that crystallized into a problem of Nigeria. And in the process, a coup happened. And when the coup came, all kinds of things led beyond that. And then there was killing of people everywhere, particularly in the North. And by the time people knew what was happening, the colonial masters had played their game again, because my research showed me that it wasn't the Igbos that wanted to secede. It was the Northerners. It wasn't the East that planned the secession. No. I remember very clearly, Ojukwu said it several times. He is one man that stopped the coup because he refused to release the key to the armory. And he's an Igbo man. And you say it's an Igbo coup. Thank God, people like Babangida wrote a book recently that said it's not an Igbo coup. It was a coup of young men who saw their country going adrift, and they wanted to bring it back to position. There happened to be more of Igbo people, and then the fella who was sent to do his duty in the East failed. Then you went beyond that. You fought the war on one handed because it's like two people wanting, and then you hold the hands of one at the back, tie it up, and say, "Go and fight." You can't win. I don't like to talk about Biafra because it pisses me off. Then when you go beyond that, the war ended. No victor, no vanquished. For where? Why is it that in the eastern zone, particularly in the area of southeast, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles, there is a police checkpoint, military checkpoint, navy checkpoint, that checkpoint. Once you go beyond Noble and Noble, you don't see that again. Anywhere going to east, going to the west, going to the north, going to the south. It's only in
I'm
south.
surprised. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Sorry.
The day I went to Kaduna from Abuja was the day I was very, very surprised. On my way from Abuja to Zaria in Kaduna, I didn't see no roadblock. I just saw the police vehicle parked by the side of the freeway. By the side of the freeway, not blocking any road. They are there in case if there's any emergency for them to come. No road was blocked. I was shocked. That was the day I know that we have two Nigeria. One Nigeria in the east where there's a lot of roadblocks, and the other Nigeria where there are no roadblocks. Go ahead.
Well, and then you see, for people to now provide their own security, they have vigilantes, and those vigilantes are now most times regarded as no, what do they call them? No known gunmen. No, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of flu.
Unknown gunmen.
Unknown gunmen. So, what you can't protect them. They cannot protect themselves. When they protect themselves, we call them, terrorists or whatever, and all that, and use that excuse to go and, uh, uh, violently take over a place. That is happening now. What the government will do with it is yet to be seen. But I heard there was a major attack in some village in the Imo State, I believe, and actually arrested a few or killed a few people. That's just, mago as the military will call it.
So
But
what will be your advice now for Ndi Igbo and Africans? How they should be relating with the UN, since the UN have failed them?
Well, as I said before, I just hope they can come together. The African nations actually come together and look at the type of people who have been in power for over 20-something years and making room for their kids. Look at Cameroon. Look at what happened in Togo. Look at Benin Republic. Now, Nigeria may not be one man and his children, but it's seemingly the same thing because it's the same 10 and 10 pence, as they say. It's the same process. They have a cahoot and they hand over power to their next. So, but the case of Africans in the United Nations is not easy because it goes beyond politics. It's issue of economics. Like the president of the United States is talking about tax tariffs and all that in order to save their economy. Economists have said that the policy doesn't sit too well in international geopolitics. I mean, the economics, geoeconomics. So, but there is a power in Africans coming together, trade directly with your own brothers instead of a trade deal going to France from Togo to France before it comes back to Benin. It goes straight to Benin. Benin is just across the border. If I remember the days when if you made a call, AT&T will route you to London before it goes to Lagos and stuff like that. Well, they are beginning to make some changes and different. So coming together to trade together, to work together, to insist on focusing on what is best for local than what is best for the colonial masters before you look at your brother next door is one major way to go. And do it because regardless of what you did, you will not come out of that colonial mentality and influence of economic dependency. You only get political, so-called political independence. So from the United Nations vantage point, Africa is not going to be released to go and like I said, we have such a short time, but I think we had a good time. At least we started to scrape the surface of some of these issues, and maybe hopefully next time will be a little more detailed and talk more of Africa in the north, the difference between the white Africans and the black and the Negroes of Africa, because that politics is there and it affects some of the the issues we are talking about. You have some people who are Africans like the Algerians, Moroccans, Egyptians, Libyans, who are of another race, but they are the same Africa. Africa has different ethnic groups, but some of them, if something happens in the Arab world, the entire North Africa will be concerned. But if something happens in Zimbabwe, they probably pretty much don't appear to have interest in that. And those type of divisions should be looked at and be eliminated to make one Africa.
Thank you very much for joining us today. In our next session, we shall delve into those areas, including the Arab infusion into Africa. And today, I hope you enjoyed the interactive session by Keny Inugo, a public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy. Thank you very much for joining us as we continue. If you are interested in joining us on a live session to discuss Ndibo, to discuss African affairs and world affairs, please let us know and we will invite you at the appropriate time. Thank you very much for joining us and have a very, very good day. Thank you and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Share this lecture. Share it to get everybody. Like, comment, and share. Thank you very much.